Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Nedarim Daf Ayin Hey. Begin 10 lines down from the top of the Yomit, 11 lines up on the bottom of the Yomit, or somewhere in the middle. Is the halacha, the next Mishnah, continuing the theme of the previous Mishnah. We had a machlokes Rebbe Elazar and the Chachamim regarding this halacha of hafaras nedarim. We're going to have a machlokes regarding a kal v'chomer regarding the ability to be made for a neder. Shis goes by Bekazach and Necheskel turn to Daf Hashem. We're doing today's daf. Something discussed in today's daf is the halacha of kol nedarim shetaduri. If a husband tells his wife, any neder that you're going to take, make kansha avim complaining until I'm going to get back from a certain place, harehin kayamin is pre-certifying her nedarim because he's going away for a long trip. Lemekul hasn't said anything, but we have machlokes Rebbe Elazar and the Chachamim regarding hafarat shleichalu. Can you make an afara before it didn't even take a basis? Look, I know you're going to go ahead and get a religious, inspiration. Whatever you're saying, I'm being made for right now. So machlokes, if you could. Now, regarding Rebbe Elazar's opinion that made for Achshleichalu, he holds you can be made for before it even takes effect. Very interesting. The lom the shakasha the Gemara has. Do you say meichel chol no betelim? Yeah, it's going to take effect, but he's already having that the nullification will take effect, or is it leichol and klal, or is he has the ability to preempt and that it's not going to take effect at all, as the Gemara's question that the Gemara is not necessarily going to resolve. Hatfasa is the halacha that you transfer sanctity from something else. So let's say there's a carbon, and you say this should be like a carbon. You're transferring the sanctity from that thing. We're going to see how that relates actually to that to the Gemara's discussion. Some important terms of content today's da'ar tahar blua lemitama. If you have a ring, let's say that you swallow, and you go into a tumas into oilames, the ring does not become tumah because it's swallowed up tumah. And also the concept of hakedini, which is, although the Gemara might compare two things, it doesn't mean it's exactly in all its parameters the same way. It means conceptually, but one could have one halacha, another one could have a totally different halacha. So begin the current daf, in the middle of the amid, daf ayin heman av, the next Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, if someone says to his wife, Kol nedarim shetaduri mekan, any net that you can take from here, meaning, the reason why he's saying in geography versus in time, means from the moment that I leave from over here. I'll complain until I come back from that place. And that's what the Ran says. It says mikan. It doesn't say miyom zeh from today. Because he actually does not intend to take it from today, only from the day that he's actually leaving. So he's telling you, when I leave this place, my Google Maps notices that I have left this location, then I want it to take effect. And why isn't that made from now? Because he's concerned that maybe while he's still there the next few hours, next few days, or whatever it is, she might make a neder that he actually is pleased with. He's like, yes, I wish she goes on that X, Y, and Z. I hope she does that. So we said this already on Daf Ayin Gimel and Aleph, like when we said regarding the case when he tells Apotropos to be made from the Nedarim, so therefore he doesn't want to say it until he actually leaves, because he might be pleased. But knowing his wife, he might not be happy what she's saying, so he wants to go ahead and preempt that. So he tells her, Harin Kayamin. So there's two different versions of this case. Case number one is, he says, whatever net you're going to take till I get back, they are pre-certified. They're validated. Says the Mishnah Loy Maklum, he hasn't said anything. Why? Because it's only regarding hafara that the Mishnah says. That's where we have the machlekes. Harein mufarim. If let's say he says, they are nullified. And we'll see this, that the reason why he can't be making is because he can't be mekayim the dam that didn't take effect. You can't certify something that doesn't exist. But let's say he says, whatever that you're going to make are already nullified. So that's where machlekes. Lezam he says, mufer. So they're nullified because of his kavachem, as we're going to explain in a moment. And they say, no, ain't a mufar, it's not nullified. So Omer Belez said, I'll tell you why. And this again is very similar to the previous Mishnah where he was saying like a kabel chaymer, he was comparing it to another context, and he was saying, it says like this. Im hof in the darim shabol chal is if you can make from the darim. That came to the category of isser, meaning very strong, because it already took effect. Still, the halacha is he's allowed to be made for it. So that's very interesting. He has the power to nullify something that already took effect upon a fine nether. So lo yof in the darim, so you think he shouldn't be able to nullify the darim shlebol chal that didn't even become prohibited yet. So it's not even so severe. Now that's what the Ran says, but regarding hakama to the contrary, because although we find in the darim that already took effect, that are very strong, so that he could certify. Who said you could pre-certify a neder that didn't even take effect yet, where it's not even so strong? So you're trying to strengthen it by hakama. So that would work against it. So there, everyone agrees that you cannot be mekayim. But afara, says Rebbe Elazar, a kavachaymer. If it's a strong thing, you could smash it. So it's not even here yet. You could definitely prevent it. Which Amalei, they said to him, good svara, but it doesn't work because it's a gzeis hakasa. But the pasuk is a midbar, and we already quoted this pasuk once before. It says, "Isha yikimena v'isha yifarena." when a woman takes a neder, her husband will be mekayim or her husband will be made for it. So the pasuk is making a hekish, comparing the two of them, which teaches us eshabah l'chlal hekim, and only that neder that already could be certified. Meaning, if the neder took effect, then ba l'chal hefa. Then it comes to the category of nullification. But l'chal hekim, if it did not come to the category of certifying, meaning because even you hold that if it didn't take effect, you cannot be mekayim, like we just said, everyone agrees to that. So ba l'chal hefa, if it does not come to the category of nullification, because even though you're right, you have a kabel chaymer, but the pasuk is making this hekish. That pasuk is saying, but what's kind of thing? The pasuk says it has to be able to be mekayim or hafacha, and it's not able to be mekayim if it did not take effect at all. That's machlekes we have in the Mishnah. Now the Gemara has a very interesting question. The following question: the Rabbi Eliezer that he says that the husband could pre-nullify, could preempt her nedarim before she even takes a neder. Yes, but do we say that those nedarim that she took, that after his hafacha, right, the maisa hafacha, there's a chalois and there's the maisa, and this happens actually very often. We just don't say those words so much because we're not giving that type of interpretations. But he's doing a maisa hafacha now. He's doing the action of hafacha. There's going to be a chalois. It's going to take effect. It can't take effect obviously until she takes a neder. There's no such neder to be made for. But when it does take effect, how does it work? Is it meichal chalon? Is it that his hafara is not ma'akiv, doesn't hold back her neder is taking effect? Her neder takes effect. But ubetalen. But then the moment she takes it, it then nullifies her right away, because that's what hafara is. Hafara is not a preempting thing. Hafara is a demolishing thing. So she takes the neder, okay, the moment you take it, it's going to be nullified. Maybe no, lechal and klal. Or maybe no, since he did hafara before she even takes the neder, so it can't make you have an effect of a neder because I already was made for it. You can't fire me, I quit. It's like you're already out of the picture. So that's the Gemara's question about how does the mechanics work over here in this preemptive hafara. Is it that when she takes the neder and it's chal, then his hafara is going to knock it out? Or then no, then make you can't even do a neder in the first place. Meaning you'll take a neder, but you'll do a ma'isa neder, but there's not going to be any validity to this neder whatsoever. How do you see that? When we're going to discuss this, but how do you see that? For what? That then you could be made for it. But maybe that's...
Hafara works afterwards, so then it came into the neder.
But he's Maisa Hafara is beforehand. Yeah, good svar. But you could say that, no, the Kal V'chomer is saying isn't the Maisa Hafara. You're right, both of them are going to be happening after it takes effect. But one, his whole Maisa is only coming after she already has a neder. Here, his Maisa Hafara was beforehand. Yeah, so good shaila. But that's a way you could explain the Gemara's question. So you must say, wait a second. Hello, lamay nafkimina. What's the relevancy of this question? It's a very nice, analytical, speculative question that you have over here. But what's the ramification? This is very important, actually, as you continue on the base. Kugoin the itfis achrina bahadi nidra. The ramification would be, and the rounds are all here on Amud Aleph, but that, for example, let's say someone else went and did hatfasa, did a transference on her neder. So, for example, let's say she took a neder, I'm becoming a Nazira. I'm so inspired, I see that this, not drinking wine, and I see something very holy about this. She says, I'm taking a neder, I'm becoming a Nazir. Then someone else comes along and says, and I'm like her. Oh. So the Gemara explains. And if you say what happens is that it takes effect, and it's just that the moment after it takes effect, he's nullifying it, it happens nullification. Then having tfisusa. That means say that other person has something to transfer, because although it's bottled right away, even so, but it took effect. So the other person could be matfis in that effectiveness. Because when that person said, am like her, it was on the Ahreni Nazir that she says, which took effect. So you could transfer that momentary neder that she had, you could transfer that. You were going on that moment and said, I want to transfer that. But if you say it does not take effect at all, there's no substance over here. So therefore, there's nothing to be matfis, says the Gemara. So that's our question, what would the halacha be? Is it that it's taking effect and it's just right away being demolished? Or it's not even taking effect at all? The usual ramification would be if someone does hatfasa in her neder.
Why is that relevant though? Because really, he's just echoing whatever she said. So whether or not her neder is hal is not relevant to what he's saying. He's saying, I want to be a Nazir.
Right. Okay. So I'm gonna. There's a round right now. The round's gonna discuss that exact point. Before the round, you say that it's on that, it's not whatever she's saying. That's what the Ram was saying, is on Harini Nazira. On that, which happened, lasts for a nanosecond, whatever it is, that, I wanted to transfer that. And there was something over there. Oh, but the Ram does ask.
It falls off.
Yeah, but I'm not going into falling off. I'm not going on that. I'm just transferring. If let's say, wait a second. If there's a carbon, if there's a carbon, and I say this behemoth should be like this carbon, and then a day later someone goes and he's pointed that carbon. Oh, it didn't last. Doesn't make a difference. I transferred that sanctity that was there at that moment. So here also, this woman, the Harin and Nazir, I'm transferring that. So even though it's not there 2 seconds later, even though this carbon that I was matfis is not there a day later because someone was played it, doesn't make a difference to me. I was matfis that sanctity. I don't care what happens to that. So here also, the shaila is
the husband's mocked for the nether, right? Let's just say she said she wanted to be she wants to be Naziris, and he's
right.
Later on.
Right.
It's not relevant to what that guy is saying. In other words,
so you're saying it
doesn't matter if the nether is chal or not. It doesn't matter.
Why not? If it took effect,
because what he's really saying.
The other person.
The one that's
I want to be like her.
Yeah.
So I want to be like.
I want to be like her. Not,
so the Ran saying is.
Because the husband can always be mocked for the nether afterwards. So.
Yeah,
but so now that your husband's mocked, so now my nether is mocked also.
No, so it wouldn't be. Yeah.
So
that's
it
why.
It doesn't matter whether or not there's a hafara here or not.
No, if we say that the neder never took effect, so you can't say I'm like her because she doesn't have any neder. If you say the neder takes effect and then it becomes batal a second later, then there was hatfas over here. It did take effect because I want to be like her and that I ran in a zira. So this person that says and I'm like her, depending how you explain your Belez's opinion, would have the ramification if there's hatfas here or not. But what the Ran does say says he quotes like this. He has a few questions. Question number one, he says, is even if you're going to say it's similar to what everyone here is saying. Even if you're going to say that her neder takes effect but then it's right away batal, how could you do hatfasa? Why is it different than what we had the question in the beginning of the sugya of Yerav and base? We had a case if someone puts down a piece of meat of shlamim after you already sprayed the blood, and then you did hatfasa to another piece of meat, and you said this piece of meat should be like this piece. So we wanted to know: are you being matfis in what's called diminikara, what it was kachim before you had sprayed the blood and was forbidden, or are you being matfis in the hetera, which is right now, which is permitted to eat this meat of the kachim? And the Gemara comes out that it's behetera matfis, and you're being matfis what's permitted. So this woman is the same thing. Ultimately, she's going to be permitted. So if you're being matfis behetera, because that's the conclusion, so who cares that it was chal and then bottle? Lamaisa, it's being matfis behetera. Says around, no, you could say that's not comparable. There it's different because you're saying zeh kezeh. So we're saying, just like it is right now, is what you're saying this piece of meat should also be right now. Right now, this is a mutter piece of meat because the blood was already sprayed in the mizbeach. But over here, when this woman says, I'm a nazira, and this other woman does hatfas and says, and me too, it sounds like that specifically the naziris that she's saying right now that she's being matfas. And says that's obvious from the sugya of naziris that we're going to say shortly that is the way it is. But then he has another question. He says, okay, although that you're going to say hatfas is going to take effect, who cares? You should still say, since Lamaisa, and this is similar to what you were saying, since Lamaisa you're doing hatfasa in her, so when the husband mavatal the first neder, then by default, the second woman's neder should be batal, because that's the halacha of hatfasa, as the Mishnah teaches in Nazir Daf Chafim Abeis. If let's say one person says, I'm a Nazir, and his friend says, and me, and the other one says, and me, they're all Nazirin. If the first one's neder becomes mutter, they're all permitted. And we quoted this already on Daf Chavav Madalv and Samach Vav Madalv, that we say that when they're totally one in the other, the first one's mutter, they're all mutter. So who cares if it's chal and then batal? L'maisa, you're totally in her, and if her is batal, then yours also batal. Says the Ran, no, it's not a question at all. It says because we didn't say this halacha that if the first one's mutter, they're all mutter. That's only if you go to the chacham, who's matter the neder. What does the chacham do? He's oika neder mi'ikarai. He uproots it like it was never there. So yeah, each one of them is going to be mutter because it's revealed now retroactively there was never neder in the first time, and there's no hatfasa to take effect because it's never a neder. But the husband is not oikrit retroactively; it's only mikal haba from here on. So even though the first one, this wife is mutter, the other ones would remain aser because the hatfasa of theirs would not become batal. And he says, really, it's a mafurish gemara in Nazir Daf Chavav Mabeis. The Gemara has the question: is Baal me'eka akar megis guys? Does a husband uproot it or just cut it off. It says, what's nafkamina? To a woman that takes neder of Naziris and her friend says, and hears it and says, and me, and the husband of the first one goes in his mayfrid. If you say me'aka, he uproots it so the other one will be permitted. If you say megiz gayis, no, she'll be permitted, but her friend will be aster, and we hope megiz gayis, and therefore, that says the Ran, that's why we have legitimate question over here in the Gemara, is it that it's not taking effect, or it is taking effect, but it becomes batal right away. So what's the halacha? So we're on the third line over here on Amud Beis. So okay, let's bring a raya from our Mishnah. And someone already tried bringing a raya from our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah say? Rabbi Eliezer. Eliezer says the following words. He says, wait a second, Rabbi said, don't disagree with me that you can't preempt a hafara. I'll bring you right that you could preempt a hafara. If you tell me that the husband can be made from the darm, they already were prohibited. So it's a very strong thing, which is regular how a husband usually does it. So, and he's allowed to be made for it. You think he can't be made from the darm that didn't become even us? It's a shvacha thing, it's a wicked thing, for sure he should be able to be made for. Okay, that was his words in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Shema Mina, we can infer from there that lo yichalin, that he would hold it wouldn't take effect at all. Where do you see that? So the Ran says, appears to me in my eyes, he says, why do you see from here that the words that he's saying that doesn't take effect at all? Because he actually says the words of the Mishnah actually are not maduk like that, the Ran says. He says the words of the Mishnah, the words are hafara, meaning the words seem to compare it to a regular hafara, which a regular hafara is taking effect and then be made for. So the Ran's actually asking, where do you see that it's not chal? To the contrary, if you looked at the words per se seem to indicate that it is taking effect. And then you read it become batal. So he says, no. He says, because if you're going to say that they don't take effect, then I could understand there's a kal v'chomer. Because if hafara is mavatal nedarim that already took effect, for sure, that it shouldn't take effect. This is really what you were saying before, that's the kal v'chomer. What's the kal v'chomer? If you made for nedarim that already took effect, so for sure to make it that doesn't take effect in the first place. But if you're going to say that it's chal and then he's been mevatlet, what kal v'chomer is there? Then that's what you were saying. That was your svara. If it's taking effect, so it's b'ol chal issa. So what's the kal v'chomer? It's no different than the regular situation. So says the Gemara, no, mikutani, did we say she'enon boyin? In other words, if it would be like you would want to say, the time the Mishnah should have said she'ein boyin. That wording would sound like that the hafara is holding back, that it doesn't come at all. But it doesn't say that. Shaloi bo katani. It just means that adayin loy bo. It didn't yet come. But it will ultimately come. And it will take effect. So therefore, obviously, the time the Mishnah holds that it takes effect. It's just that that it's going to come right away batal. So wait a second, so what's the kal v'chomer? Says no, still there's kal v'chomer, because if hafara is mavat nedarim that already became aser, and there was no hafara there, for sure, again, like I think what the lumdus means is he did a ma'isa hafara, which therefore when the neder is starting, it's already starting with a pre-blemish already, because he already did a ma'isa hafara, which hafara is about. That's the kal v'chomer from Rabbi Eliezer. You don't really have a raya from the Mishnah. To the contrary, the wording of the Mishnah almost might be sounding like that it does take effect. So we don't have a raya that it's nachal. So the Gemara says, okay, Tashma, let's bring another raya from the following brisa. Brisa says, Amram Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer said to them, wait a second. Uma b'makom shein meifen nidrei atzmoi mishenadar. If the husband, when he takes a neder, once he takes the neder, he cannot be made for his nedar. That's a pasuk in the Torah. Lo yachal devarai. You take a neder, you not profane your words. Now, others could be materit for him. They could make it profane for him. Yeah, but he cannot do it himself. And still, he could pre-nullify his own nadarim. And this is what the famous custom that we have in the Gemara Born Daf Yomi Beis. If someone wants to have that his nadarim should not be valid all year round, he gets a Rosh Hashanah and he says, Kol nidrei, any neder, you mufarin, oh kinus, everything should be. Oh, so wait a second. Beautiful kal v'chomer, says Eliezer. Makim shemeifen nidri ishte mishetade. So if he can be made for his wife's nedarim, even after she took the neder, which a regular person cannot do for themselves, in the din isn't kal v'chomer shefen nidri ishte actually tada. Good svara. He says a regular guy cannot be made for his own, but beforehand he could. So for sure, wife that he could do it once she did, for sure he could do it beforehand. Okay, that's the brisa. That's not the main thing we want. The Gemara wants to say, but what are we trying to see from over here? My love, isn't it that Rabbi Eliezer was saying the ishtoi dumya delay? It was comparing his wife's Nadarim to his own Nadarim. That the same way he could be mad to his own Nadarim is what you're saying. He could do to his wife's Nadarim before they happen, which is Mahud Lechalan. Obviously, when you make Kol Nidre, it's not that you're making that they'll take Chal and then be made because you can't do that. Obviously, that Reb Eliezer is saying a Kavachlemer to the Nadarim of his own wife, just like his don't take effect, because again, if they would take effect, he would need a heter from the Chacham. Af Ishtainami, also his wife also. That what? Deloi Chaylen. You see from Eliezer's wording that he's saying that it's not going to take effect. That answers our question. Says Gemara, no, not true, not necessarily, because Hakadisa b'Hakadisa. You could say that no, this is like the way it is, and this is the way it is. In other words, that even Reb Eliezer learns out of Kavachlemer from his own Nadarim to the Nadarim of his wife, it's not that he's totally comparing the two of them. You're right. By him, it's that it does not take effect at all. By his wife, it's going to take effect. And even so, it's still going to be a valid Kavachlemer. Ultimately, he's still learning Kavachlemer, although it's not going to be exactly the same. Now, the Ran, however, does say, what's difficult to me on this, he says, is wait a second. Why don't you learn out from his Kavachlemer that the Nadarim of his wife should not take effect at all? Just like his own Nadarim. Why don't you? Why is that not inherent of a part of the Kavachlemer? He said, it appears to me that you can't make such a Kavachlemer. Because by his own Nadarim, the reason is because when he makes a stipulation from beforehand, they're not going to take effect at all, because since the way it works is that we said Kol Nidre works is that you forget your Tanai. You forgot that you said you don't want to. You forget that when you make a neder. So essentially the way Kol Nidre works is that it makes that any neder you take throughout the year is a neder b'tois. Because you forgot that you had already mentioned in Rosh Hashanah that you're not going to take a neder anymore. So if it's not going to take effect at all. By the Nidre Ishtay, you can't say that. It's not Nidre toys. She knows what she's saying. You just have an ability as a husband to be made for. You can't say that same svara. You can't say that when you took preempted that makes into Nidre toys. Nidre toys is like, yeah, you don't need, it's not taking effect at all. But when the husband's doing that preempting to the wife, it's not making Hanadam that Nidre toys. But however, regarding the fact that his wife's Nedarim should be moved after to take effect, that you can learn from a Kavachlemer. Because since by his own Nedarim we find that a Tanai before the Neder is Mavatal Nedarim before he even takes the Neder, even so, he says that case itself is not going to be Mavatal only after taking the Neder, because every Neder that becomes permitted with a Pesach is a Neder Toys. Because who cares if you could say that had I known beforehand I wouldn't take a Neder, or who cares that you could say that had I known that I have a Pesach that I know now would never take a Neder, that's the same thing. But what are you going to say? That although in that same case of making Tanai, he doesn't permit for himself after the Neder, but whenever you go beforehand, in that same case of the Neder, he could be permitting for himself. So that's what we're saying. For sure, the husband, where the halacha would tell us also the same thing in such a case that if he can be made for after she took Nedarim, which is made for Nedarim from far on onwards, and he's not going to be uprooting it, he's only going to be made for Mekan Labah. So for sure, he can be made for until she doesn't take a Neder, that it will take effect, but make a bottle. So that's the Ran just explaining that the Gemara is not asking that we should learn that from Mekabel, because by the guy himself, it makes it inherently into Neder Toys. But by a woman, it can't. But it's still similar in the fact of just like after you take a Neder, you can go to the Chacham and have a Pesach, say, I would never have taken such a thing. That's a Neder Toys. You could also, beforehand, take Nidre and also make a Neder Toys. So you see the concept that you could compare post to pre, so the wife also, you compare post to pre. That just like he made for it afterwards, so he can make it, but it's still not going to be necessarily, it's not taking Chal, because Haikadina. His not going to be Chal, because Neder Toys, hers will take effect, just like the way it normally is with a woman.
Why isn't every neder that a woman makes Taila on whether the husband agrees to it or not?
What do you mean Taila?
Meaning it should be suspended. In other words, she's making a neder, but theoretically speaking, the husband has to be in on it.
I mean, he has an ability.
If he decides he wants to be mafra neder, the neder is not caught.
Well, we know that's the case.
So I'm saying, why is the protocol that, if he hears about it later, then he's...
Well, that's what Torah says. Torah says it's only b'yam shema. When he hears about it, then he has the ability to be made for it. But until he does, it's a valid neder, and he's only made for it mikan labah. He's not made for it not oiker l'mafreya. It's only mikan labah. That's the exercise of how the husband has. So we have not proven yet that Rabbi Eliezer holds that it doesn't take effect or that it does take effect. And says, okay, Tashma, this gets a little bit more complicated simply because of the content matter, the subject matter of the Brisa. Tashma, let's hear from the following Brisa. This is a conversation they must have been learning for a few weeks, the sugya here, because you see the different contexts that they say. So they said to Rabbi Eliezer as follows: we're going to disprove your logic that you're trying to make of this kal v'chomer to show that the husband could be preemptive in his afara because of a mikveh. What does a mikveh have to do with this sugya? So I'll tell you. Even though shemal esatimei mutumasam, when you take something that became tummy and you put it into the mikveh, what happens? The tummy item becomes tar. Ein matla tahar milatame. It does not save something tahar from becoming tummy. And the round here is on the middle of towards the end of the narrow lines on the Ayin Vav Med Aleph, that the pasuk says, "V'hanageya b'nivlasam yitma." Whoever touches the nevela will become tummy. Hillel says it's even in the mikveh. In the mikveh, if you touch what's called tevel v'sheretz biyada, we know the famous terminology of Rabbi that talks about doing tshuva with acharata. It's like tevel v'sheretz biyada. Means if you're teveling and you're touching the sheretz in the mikveh, it doesn't prevent being in the mikveh will not prevent you from becoming tummy. If you're tummy, you go to the mikveh, it'll deter you. But if you're in the mikveh and you touch your tummy, you will be tummy. So wait a second. So Adam, a person, shein mal. Again, this is a little bit complex, a few steps. But again, the Chacham are trying to prove to Rabbi Eliezer we don't have this kal v'chomer trying to tell us. A person shein mal esatmei mutumasan, who does not elevate something from its tumah. In other words, let's say a tahar person swallows a tummy ring, and then he vomits it or he excretes it. The item did not become purified by being swallowed by the person. The ring is still going to be tummy. Einoidin who is not a kal v'chomer shlo yatzel ala tahirim milatame. That's so for sure he should not be able to save that which is tahar from becoming tummy, right? Because I'm showing you from the mikveh that a mikveh can be mitaras atmeim, but it will not prevent it from becoming tummy. So a person who doesn't even have the value of a mikveh to mitar what's tummy, for sure, based on kal v'chomer, it should not be able to prevent a Torah thing from becoming tummy. That's the simple logic. Now, meaning, if let's say someone swallows a ring, sometimes it happens, babies, you're going to watch them on the floor, make sure they swallow everything, and then someone passed away, and the baby was no'el mess, and then after they left the room, they did, the baby went to the bathroom, and out comes this ring. It makes sense that it should not prevent the ring from becoming tummy, as the logic that we just said. However, and this you have to add this on with the Ran, because the else you wouldn't know what exactly is being said. Even so, it's not true. Actually, the person does save the swallowed ring from becoming tummy, as the Gemara says in Chul Daf and Alpha Mabez. Okay, so what are the Chacham want from Rabbi Eliezer? So obviously we see that we don't make such a kal v'chomer. What do you mean? What type of kal v'chomer? From what already took effect to what did not yet take effect. Because we say, no, they have two different halachas. And that's not like a kal and a chomer. You can't say a kal v'chomer, right? Because the rest you wanted to tell me kal v'chomer. If mikveh could only do after, not before, could only do post, not pre. So a person that cannot even do post, for sure should not be able to do pre, and it's not true. Could do pre and not post. A person could prevent the ring from becoming tummy, but cannot purify it when he swallows it. Oh, so the Chacham here also, even though the husband can be made for Nedarim, which already usher, which already took a neder, we do not make a kal v'chomer from the post to the pre, that he can be made for them that if they did not become yet usher in the first place. That's the Chacham's retort to Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, that's not our main thing. That's part of the discussion. But we're trying to answer our question, which was, according to Rabbi Eliezer, is it chal or not chal? Says the Gemara, Shema Mina, I confer from this that loy chaylin, that Rabbi Eliezer must have held that it does not take effect at all. How do you see this? As this is the Ran on the first of the narrow lines here, on Daf Ayin Vav Med Aleph, says, because what did they tell him? They told him that mikveh will prove that it doesn't save a person from becoming tummy. So we see that what? But Rabbi Eliezer's kal v'chomer would have told us that the mikveh should save and they should not become to the category of tummy. Just like the husband is ma'akiv in the nederim of his wife, that it should not take effect. Because that's what they were telling him. Read into the words they're saying. Saying, well, based on you, it should be one way. But look, I could show you by mikveh it's not true. It does save, it does do with the post, and it doesn't do the pre. What pre? Pre that it should make that he doesn't become tummy. Because that's the words that they're saying, that's the concept of trying to illustrate. Oh, so meaning you're trying to tell me because according to Rabbi Eliezer, it should make such a kal v'chomer. because he holds that the preemptive makes it doesn't take effect at all. Great, we answered our question. Problem is, the continued type of Ayin Vav Mad Aleph is a little bit more complicated. The Gemara says, Ema Seifa. Let's look at the Seifa. Amalei Rabbi Eliezer. They said to Rabbi Eliezer, as the Ran explains, the Rabban had another question, Rabbi Eliezer. Based on his Kal V'chomer, you should make the following inference. A different case, also with mikvah, but a different case. Now, Ima Tvilin Kli Tami Litar. If you could go ahead and take a Kli that became Tami, and you could purify it by putting it in the mikvah, you have an amazing chap. You have Tvilin Kli, and as the Bach adds on the word tar, Toivel a pure Kli, Likashi Tami Litar. It's like preempted. Take a pure Kli and make it shine like in the mikveh. Make it prevent it from becoming tummy in the first place. Now, you obviously agree that there's no such halacha. You can't pre-taivel the Kli in the mikveh that doesn't become tummy. Obviously, that rejects your whole Kal V'chomer. Your whole Kal V'chomer was, from the post, I can prove the pre. Hello? You can't, if you could taivel a Kli to purify it, you can't prevent it by preempting it already by putting it in the mikveh. That rejects Rabbi Eliezer Kal V'chomer. Okay, again, that's not our main thing. We want to infer from the Shema Minah that obviously Chaylin, obviously Rabbi Eliezer held that the woman's neder will take effect and just the husband's bittul happens right away. Why? Where do you see that? In the words of the Chacham. What were the words of the Chacham? They said, Toivel kli likishiyitame litaher. Obviously that it will become tummy, but just that the tahara that you did from the mikveh will automatically kick in, because if not, the words of the Chacham should have been, Yatfila kli sheyatzal militame. As we said before, in the words about the mikveh, they said, Tabiyatzal al tarim. Here the words are L'Kishim L'Tar. Obviously that their understanding according to Rabbi Eliezer that it will take effect, just become right away batal. To which Amri, the Bnei Yeshiva, said that you're right. Obviously from here you could not infer because obviously this brisa, one part is saying chal, but the ratio we just proved is that loy chaylen, and the save we just proved that it's chaylen. So obviously you cannot prove from this brisa. But the only problem is now the Gemara has to resolve. So how do we understand the contradictory inferences? We want to be medayek from the words of Chacham in the Reisha that obviously yatzel, that they understood Rabbi Eliezer was trying to say it's not going to take effect. Problem is we just quoted the Sefer now on this Amid that makes it sound like that it will take effect. So okay, obviously you cannot infer. But what do we do with the contradictory inferences? So the Gemara says, what happened was Rabbanan leikaim Elohim b'tamid Rabbi Eliezer. The Rabbanan themselves didn't know the reasoning and the rationale of Rabbi Eliezer. And this is what they were telling him. My svirlach, what do you hold? What do you mean? Svirlach, if you hold the chaylin, the betalin, we don't know what you're trying to say when you're preempting. Meaning the Chacham themselves had our question, and they addressed both options. If you hold that it takes effect and then it becomes batal, okay, tav kli tiyuftach. Then the case of the Sefer should reject you, because you see over there that it does not take effect and then become pure. You cannot preempt it. You cannot prove from the post that it can be retired to the pre. And if you don't hold that it takes effect, well, to have a mikveh to you, then mikveh should refute you, because in the Sefer the Bryce from Kli Tameh we see a response to say that you wanted to be medayek that it takes effect, and we see that it's not going to be batal. And if you don't hold that it takes effect, but rather from the beginning it has no substance, then the Risha mikveh is refuting you, because we said that from there you should be medayek that it should take effect, and that it should not take effect, and we see that it is taking effect, because we see that the person does become tummy, does take effect. So even if the guy could retire himself right away and let go or whatever, be in the mikveh, but you see it's not going to save him from becoming tummy in the first place. So either one, so we are rejecting from. Thank you to any time for hosting us.